Thunderbolts might be a sign that there are better things coming for the MCU, but Thunderbolts itself doesn't yet seem ready to commit to the change that I want. I'm Peter Franson from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions. The IMDb synopsis for Thunderbolts reads, after finding themselves ensnared in a death trap, an unconventional team of anti-heroes must embark on a dangerous mission that will force them to confront the darkest corners of their pasts. I wish that were true. Maybe a couple characters are confronting the darkest corners of their pasts, but we don't get into hardly anything of the others that really, I don't see a confrontation happening in the climax. Maybe there's some stuff on the cutting room floor. That would be cool. Anyway, let's talk about what this animal feels like. All the characters in the Thunderbolts, they've appeared in previous Marvel movies. They all have criminal or otherwise shameful pasts that at this point they want to pivot away from. And they are working together to first to survive in this movie and then to stop a major threat. And they're seeing this working together towards these things as sort of the antidote to their shame that they're all reaching for as a solution. But their journeys mean almost nothing to me because the movie doesn't give true weight to their regrets in the first hour when it is most crucial to do so. The first hour or more is still filled with jokes that suck all potential tension out of the action scenes and some of these character moments. And while they're establishing that these characters want to be something different than what they once were, that's not coming out near as much, and a lot of it has to do with all the jokes that don't give any serious moment a chance to settle in. In that first hour, I almost only ever felt anything for the character who poses the big threat to this ragtag team. They were the one I felt like who emotionally most often was being invested in his scenes. Let's see here. What is this? Something works when the punchline... Oh, I wrote Highmore. I don't know what Highmore means. That's supposed to say humor in my notes. See, I can't even spell humor, so who am I to judge? But humor works when the punchline or the punchline delivery has some surprising element to it. But I felt ahead of every punchline, not knowing exactly what the punchline was, the words, but what the basics of it would be, what type of joke it was going to be, what kind of sentiment it was going to express. The jokes and their deliveries yet again also outstayed their welcome in their delivery or in their recurrence, calling back to a joke. I'm like, that's not worth calling back to. It wasn't funny the first time. And it's a shame because I think even written and performed exactly the same, there's one thing they could do that would help all of that, and that would be edit this movie more tightly so that the punchlines, there's just more snappiness to everything. If it's coming at me faster, my mind has less time to get ahead of the script and anticipate what's coming next. And I think even just with editing, they could have done something to improve the nature of how the humor lands with me. But the dialogue writing, the joke writing, the performance execution, and the editing all together still feel like they are coming out of some literal manual that Disney has for exactly how these movies must feel that cannot be deviated from. Now, I have to give the movie credit because it does deviate in some ways, some significant ways, from how a lot of these movies have felt, and in a way that I appreciated. Eventually, around or past the halfway point, some sadness is allowed to have some uninterrupted time, especially for the Sentry character, who represents the overwhelmingly powerful threat that the Thunderbolts have to deal with. And in the climactic minutes, emotional performances are given space to bring weight into the story. But in those moments, I could have been brought to tears instead of just kind of gotten the feels if they just would have committed to more opportunities for that tone in the first half of the movie. I'm not expecting Marvel movies to be all dour and to feel like Zack Snyder's DC movies, even though I loved those. I'm not expecting that. But I think you've got to have more time having those kinds of moments for the jokes to catch us off guard. It would be so much funnier if a character did something ridiculous that we would not expect because of the tone leading up to that moment. But now with so many movies, and even in this movie, when they're just being ridiculous so much throughout the whole thing, you're expecting them to be ridiculous, and it underwhelms. The logic of the movie also has some big gaps in several places. Early on, John Walker demonstrates the incredible leg strength the super soldier formula has given to him, and just a few minutes later, maybe less than a minute later, is straining to use his leg muscles specifically, and he's straining much harder than two other characters doing the same physical work with their legs. They are speaking as though they are not straining at all, and he is fighting to speak through the straining of how he's exerting his leg muscles. And these other two characters that exhibited no strain in their voice do not have the super soldier serum running through their veins. And so I'm like, what is going on here? Characters also, a little bit later, identify someone easily from over a mile away in the dark while that person is doing something the characters never would have expected them to do before, like doing a super-powered thing, and they wouldn't even known that character had superpowers. But they just like identify easily who that is, like, oh, that's that person, you know. It just feels like knowledge that the writers wanted them to have, and so they did. And so there's little bits like that, not all over the movie, but enough that I'm like, I can't buy into the stakes if I feel like there aren't logical limits for the characters, and that are treated consistently. But I do have to say there are some great performances in Thunderbolts, despite the script. Louis Pullman plays Sentry, and I know him from the Outer Range series on Amazon Prime. He does some great stuff that is at times played for comedy, yes, and I wish it wasn't, but in other times conveys great vulnerability for his character and helped me to be sympathetic in the way I think I was supposed to be. Florence, I'm going to butcher her name, P-U-G-H. I don't know if that's Pug, Pew, anyway, she plays the new Black Widow, if she's ever going to be called that. But she felt believable throughout as Yelena, this tired assassin wanting to recover this long-lost innocence of her childhood. And there's a key scene between her and David Harbour, her father, the Red Guardian, in which he briefly but effectively gets to use his dramatic acting chops as well. And that scene went a long way to keep this experience from being entirely forgettable. There was about 30 minutes of this movie I genuinely at least liked. And much of that has to do with these three actors' performances. I do want to say also, though, that there were hints of great potential from Wyatt Russell as John Walker. He just wasn't given the time, the space to really lean into maybe what he could bring as an actor, but I really was sensing some potential there, and I don't think it's just because I really like Kurt Russell. I would really like a U.S. agent movie duology, at least, that eventually ends in my fantasy in the third movie not being a U.S. agent movie, but being a Captain America movie in which he is or becomes Captain America. Because I think a redemption arc, a journey for John Walker to then become ultimately someone we could see as appropriate to be Captain America. Imagine what kind of a journey he would have to, because I don't think he's at all ready for that. He's going to have to really go through some stuff. And wouldn't that make an interesting story to see how someone like John Walker eventually could be, in the audience's mind, appropriate or quote-unquote worthy for the mantle of Captain America, assuming, of course, that we're not going to be getting Steve Rogers back. I would love something like that. I highly doubt Disney Marvel has it in them, but wouldn't that be cool? As far as stunts and visuals go, less ambitious than I'd like. It didn't feel, especially cheap. But, I would have liked some more big-scale action sequences. There's one scene where the Thunderbolts go up against a Superman-level character, and I wanted the climax to be that times 10. And that's definitely not what we got. We got something that pivoted and went in a very different direction for how they were going to handle the climax. The effects, I thought they were fine, but the action and effects in general just weren't as big as I want most superhero movies to feel now. All right, themes. Is there anything of moral, philosophical, or spiritual significance in the themes of this thing that could trigger some worthwhile thought or conversation? Well, we have themes of past shame, especially with the character Yelena. We've got a theme of loneliness, depression, specifically the loneliness of struggling with depression and mental illness by yourself, and that really comes to the front in the character of Bob. The solution to both seems to be, if I were to guess, because I don't think it's really clear, but the solution to both seems to be relationship with others and being open and sharing our hurt and shame. And these are good things that can potentially help. but they are not the solutions themselves. They are barely the beginning. Well-intentioned friends that you open up to can give bad advice when we share our troubles with them. And there is no shortage of bad therapists giving empty and impotent counsel. I think so many people end up going to a therapist, and what they really need is a wise, loving, compassionate believer in their life. And so that's a call for us as Christians to more and more become those types of people, because they don't need just a Christian. They need a disciple of Jesus that's wizened and maturing. Certainly more than a bad therapist. There are some great therapists. There are plenty of bad therapists. Especially, I had some conversations. One with a friend of mine years ago, I won't repeat here, but I'm just like, oh my gosh, I can't. And even he years later was like, yeah, she was a bad therapist. Oh, they're all over the place. Anyway, okay, shame ultimately has to be dealt with by trusting in the forgiveness and identity. Identity is another key issue here. A lot of negative self-talk and stuff that has to be dealt with by a character. And these things really need to be ultimately dealt with by trusting in the forgiveness and the identity provided through Jesus and through his love and sacrifice on our behalf. And truly useful counsel is not only going to be medically and psychologically sound, but also based on an understanding of the truth about who we are, what purpose humans were made for, and the kinds of things that divert us from our purpose. Truth that has to find its ultimate source at some point in God's Word. Now, that said, I don't want to be too hard on the movie thematically or expect too much of it. It's good that it raises these issues and provides a first step of being open about our struggles in relationships with people who care about us. Unfortunately, even on that level, the tone of the first half of the movie keeps even that basic message from being powerful in the way I think it really could have been. All right. No idea what your tastes are in movies, but if I were a time traveler, I'd go back in time and say, Peter, skip this one. I used to think of movies as the final culmination of adapting something. Like, wouldn't it be cool if there was a movie of this comic book? But now, having just started a subscription to Marvel Unlimited, I'm thinking, wouldn't it be cool if there was a comic version of this movie, of these characters? And you know what? There's actually years of that, so why not go check that out instead and wait and see if some future MC movie will make you want to go back and try this one. This one's rated PG-13 for strong violence, language, thematic elements, and some suggestive and drug references. Okay, I don't know, that's a weird way of saying that. Anyway, those are all of my thoughts for now on Thunderbolts. As always, love to get your thoughts and reactions in the comments below. Please like, share, subscribe, click that bell to stay connected. I want to thank the Spirit Blade Insiders for making this review possible. You can get info about the benefits of joining over at patreon.com/spiritbladeproductions. Then I hope you'll check out our podcast and stay connected to all CGC content over at christiangeekcentral.com as we continue to geek out and seek the truth. For more chat about geek entertainment, answers to your questions, and news from the wider world of Christian geekery, get the Christian Geek Central podcast today on iTunes and other podcast services.